There we go. We in theory should have some sound now. I will deal with the popping in a second. Let's see. What do we want to use for an image today? I don't know. Let's just go with this one for the hell of it. There we go. Little bit of distance here. And this is going to be a little different. Let me see if I can find my stream here so I can pop out let's see now. Do we have there we go. Yeah. Okay. No, that's not it. Let's find it. Ah, there we go. That should be it. And it's showing the stream quality is crap. That's nice. Yeah, give me a moment. And pop out chat. There we go. Yay, now I can see the chat. Hey, Gretchen. This is going to be a little bit different. It's just going to be me talking, and I'm not sure I want to be on camera, but I guess I should probably pop in my video somewhere, I guess. I don't know. Add source. Devices. Let's put it out there anyway. There we go. I just stick myself in the corner here. Yeah, one thing that I haven't really talked about, I have like 2 viewers, and I don't know if I'm going to get more later or if anyone's going to watch this, but one thing I haven't really properly spoken about is my experience having the strokes. And I kind of feel like I should at some point. I mean, get the glasses off. I don't, well, I'll need these if anyone types anything. There we go. Oh, actually, that says Danny's picture. It looks like Gretchen's picture. Sorry. Um, over the course of the last few years, have had a couple strokes, including some mini strokes. The mini strokes aren't that big a deal. They're there, they're gone. It's like nothing. Most of these have affected my language with the way that it goes. The damage that I've had has always been this one hand, in both cases. Legs are fine, whatever. Right arm is relatively fine, except for a little random nerve damage. But the left hand, the first stroke, I lost use of my entire left arm. And the way I got use of that arm back was actually by getting really pissed off at a nurse. She comes in, and now, mind you, I write, so I need my hands. So the nurse comes in and she makes the comment, and I'm like, "Yeah, I'm just missing the one arm." And she's like, "Well, that's good. At least it wasn't a leg." I'm like, "I right." She says, "But wouldn't you rather it be an arm than a leg?" I'm like, "No, I right." And she says one more time, and I reach for her throat, like, "You little," and I'm like, "Oh, hey, my arm moved," and that was kind of that. So sometimes stressful situations and this kind of stuff can actually help to some degree with recovery. But at the same point, too much stress at the same point can lead to potentially the increased blood pressure and what have you can lead to another stroke, which is certainly not a good thing. Um, but yeah, after that first stroke, because the thing is, you don't really know what the damage is when the stroke happens. You find out more about it later. So initially, I was having problems, and what was happening was my brain was filling in gaps in my vision, kind of like an autofill brush. So at one point, I looked down the street, and the street was empty. There was nothing there. And then my wife grabs my arm as I almost stepped directly in front of a truck because, to my vision, the street was completely clear. There was nothing there. And she didn't know what the hell was going on there, and neither did I, because I looked and there was no truck. So what's going on there is a processing issue in my brain. So then later we went back into the hospital and got Starbucks. And lo and behold, we get up there and I'm looking at the top of the cup and there was no hole in it to drink out of. I'm like, what the heck? So she sits there and slowly turns it. And after about 15 degrees, the hole came back. Well, that hole in my vision isn't stable. It keeps moving around. And after the most recent stroke, it's actually gotten worse. And instead of it being one patch that kind of moves around the screen or what have you, because I have a like 52-inch screen over here, so I could move windows so that I could see what I was trying to look at. And that's changed now. Now it's kind of a donut shape instead of just the whole of the donut, so to speak. It's the outer edge of the donut that I can't see in. So it kind of slowly moves around too. And not just with my head movements, but just sitting there staring straight at the screen, that donut shaped hole will start moving around. And adapting to that's been really troublesome. But after the first stroke, I started noticing issues. Certain words just weren't there anymore. And I felt like there was a wall between me and the word that I was actually trying to say. And being somebody that, I'll sit there and I'll debate topics having to do with like religion and what have you, there are certain terms that I would use on a fairly regular basis that just weren't there anymore. And I'd go to try to say them and the wrong words would come out. So what I had to do is retrain my brain to actually allow myself to say these words again. But part of the problem is that you don't know which words are screwed up until after you start trying to say them, and you're like, wait, no, that's wrong. Now, cognitively, you're aware you just screwed up, or at least I was in my case, the first time around. Now, this is actually something that, well, I was attributing it to my stroke. Going through some of my older videos, I noticed that there were times, even back in the day, that I'd throw the wrong word in there and not even notice it and just keep going. And sometimes this can be fairly dramatic, like missing the word not or something like that, because a lot of times we don't necessarily slow down to make sure we're clear in what we're saying. I've had to be since that first stroke, and I've also become hyper aware of when other people use the wrong word. And usually, they don't even notice it and just keep going. But the interesting thing about them not noticing it is that they're not the only ones. No one in the hangout or room or what have you would seem to notice that they used the wrong word either. Which to me started making me wonder if I was hearing them wrong or if my brain was somehow interpreting the words that they're saying incorrectly. And I've had to actually rely on external input to verify that that's the case, that it's not simply just me. Now, we go through life thinking that we can trust our senses. Now, part, as near as I can tell, of how we learn to be able to trust our senses and what the reliability is of those senses is based upon external input. It's based upon talking to other people to confirm, our perception is reliable. And we take this for granted and don't necessarily see it because this is a process that starts when you're a very young child. So this idea of reliability follows us through life. And the scaffolding of it is built when we're really in those early formative years. Now, a friend of mine years and years ago was a horrible, horrible driver to the point that, we would be afraid to get in the car with him because he was that person that's like, okay, and you take a left here, and you would start turning into oncoming traffic, and you're like, what the hell? Can't you see the headlights? Well, come to find out that my friend actually had a serious visual impairment. Years later, he actually found out that he needed glasses and made the comment, I can now see every blade of grass. It's incredible. It's really cool that I can see all the leaves on the tree. And we're thinking, oh my God, I used to be getting cars with this guy. Holy crap. It was kind of a frightening thing. But at the same point, for him, he thought his vision was normal up to that point. He didn't know he had a problem with vision. And on some levels, it's a similar kind of thing when you get the kind of cognitive damage you get when you have a stroke. Because for everything that I was aware of or that I did notice, and I just dropped something. Let me see if I can see where that landed. Sorry. There it is. Okay, sorry. There's actually something on that flash drive. I can't lose that. But you're not necessarily aware of all of the damage that has happened. Now, after my initial stroke, I was sitting there, and it seemed like I could read just fine. I didn't initially know that there was a problem with my vision. Now, when I went to the cognitive therapist, they sat me down and they had this page with these rows of numbers on it. And what you're supposed to do is go from row to row with the numbers and read them off. And you start off with, I think it was odd. And then she'd have you switch to the even partway through. And when I switched from odd to even, I'm sitting there going through line to line to line to line to line, no problem whatsoever. And then after I'm done, she turns to me and says, okay, well, we have an issue here. And I'm like, okay, what? And she then starts putting these long lines out through the page, showing every single line that I didn't see. I literally wasn't seeing every second line on the page. Yet in my brain, it seemed to me that every single line was there and every single line was showing. And that was it was kind of a scary thing, realizing that there was that much that I simply wasn't seeing. But eventually I managed to get over that, and I managed to recover from that. It took a lot of work, but I did. Um, I don't know, man. A lot of this is not really, I haven't quite gotten to the topic part of this yet. But there's always things that happen when you have this kind of brain damage that you're not aware of. And beyond the things that are a little bit more obvious, like, oh, gee, you're not seeing every other line in the page, or, oh, your brain's basically doing like the clone brush, the autofill for vast sections of what you're actually seeing. Or there are certain words that are mixed up. There's always aspects of it that you're not aware of. After the first of the two more serious strokes I'm talking about here, I'm not talking about mini strokes, but after the first two fairly serious strokes, I think it was about 2 months after, my wife got in a conversation with me because she was worried about me because I seemed really cold and had been for a bit of a while. I was mostly unaware of it. And after that, I started thinking about and evaluating myself. Now, the tendency in with people is when something like this happens, you start adding these post hoc justifications because we're not aware of a lot of things pertaining to our behavior and what's going on around us sometimes. And what I realized was that the part of my brain that deals with emotion at that point had turned off completely. Now, I, at the time, wrote this off as being some kind of defense mechanism, that my brain had just turned off, no emotion for me, because it's safer that way. That way my blood pressure wouldn't get any higher, didn't have to worry about getting stressed. But at the same point, I couldn't emotionally, for several months, connect with much of anyone. And this was incredibly troublesome because, I have a wife, I have kids, and just on a basic emotional level, I couldn't experience much of anything. And it took a while for that to change. But the other thing that I noticed, because I was bipolar, God, I was diagnosed, I think, back when I was like 10, 12, something around there. I think 12, actually. So when I was initially diagnosed as bipolar. The interesting side effect of that first stroke is that my bipolar mood disorder, the mood swings, they were gone. Granted, initially all emotion was gone, which is a little problematic. But the mood swings, gone completely. I was normal for a while until the second stroke. The second stroke, the one that just happened a couple months ago, that brought back the bipolar and got rid of not, well, it brought it back. I have the mood swings again. Sorry, I'm a little faltering here. I didn't exactly script this or make bullet points. I probably should have. But the mood swings are back, and I'm having to rebuild all the scaffolding that I'd put in place to try and adapt to that. So that's a thing. But in addition to that, I've also noticed, and after the first stroke, there was a little bit of a personality shift. And even and beyond simply the lack of emotion at first, once those emotions did start happening again, I was in this constant kind of Zen state. Everything was mellow. I was always calm. I kind of liked the person that I was after that first stroke. It was kind of nice. I was always chilled out. Nothing could stress me out. On a lot of levels, it felt good. And I kind of liked the person I was during that time period. You couldn't rattle me. I was very chill. There were some other cognitive issues, and my eyes were still getting a little bit weird from time to time, but I'd adapted. I had gotten back to about probably 90% use of my hand, on the left hand, that is. And things were kind of getting kind of cool. It was fine. I'm chill, I'm yellow all the time. And then comes the second stroke. And not only the mood swings back, but this irritability has come with it. And instead of, noticing that there are things, holes in my brain, so to speak, holes in my memory, holes in my vision, hell. Instead of all of that, I started noticing after the second stroke that I was getting irritable, and those little things, those little foibles and what have you, that I was just kind of like, oh, well, it's a thing for the longest time. Now they're making me angry because there's been yet another personality shift. So after a point, you have to recognize that who you are inside your head is who you are as a person. I mean, that's you. We like to get into the idea of like mind-body dualism. You can get into the notion of the divine puppeteer, any of these kind of ideas. But yeah, who you are can change. And all it takes is one blood vessel being clogged up a little bit and a few nerves dying in the right order. It can change everything. Now, at the same point, my ability to follow conversations and a lot of things that I once knew, I just don't have anymore. Now, the first time around, I had this strong feeling of, I know that I knew this, or I know that it's there, and just trying to get to that information was the problem. And this time around, that's not the case. I just feel, well, this is where flowers for algernon comes in. I'm aware that I was smarter than I am now, but I don't even feel like that information's accessible anymore. And this troubles me because as somebody that writes, one thing that I'm always paying attention to is things like foreshadowing. And I kind of think in our lives there is a certain level of that. And it's almost a karmic thing. You sit there and you make a decision based upon a potential future. And I feel like it's almost tempting that future to come true. Now, the house that I live in right now has a nice little lake out front with a fountain in it, and it's a park and all this other stuff. So you can sit there and look out the window and see the people and folks walking their dogs and the water and the fountain. And during a certain time of day, there's a nice little rainbow that you can catch just looking out the window. It's pretty. It's serene. And part of why I got this house, even though I already owned a house at the time I didn't have much of anything to pay on property tax for it because of the amount I paid for it. I bought a more expensive house with that I was going to have to pay more property tax on, in part, well, almost entirely actually for the lake, so that I could look out and relax. Because my thought was, if that stroke hits, it takes away the last of what I am. Being basically sat in my little chair and stuck in the window so I could sit there and watch the lake sounded like a nice way to run things down until my wife is finally ready to let me go. And incidentally, and I say this more so just for my own peace of mind. When that time comes that she's ready to say goodbye, when I'm at the point that all I can do is look out the window, watch the lake, and drool, I've told her how to take me out. Make it look like I just screwed up with my dosage of my medicine. Because that's not a life I want to live. I don't want to live a life in which I'm potentially trapped inside my own mind, being aware that there's a world out there but not being able to interact with it. That to me is about the scariest thought, the scariest possible thought. Or at least it was, until I noticed the personality changes of this last stroke. And now my greatest fear isn't, sitting there in front of the window, trapped in my own head, not being able to interact with the world, but becoming somebody that I don't want to be. And I don't mean just irritable me that I am now. I can deal with that. I can adapt. But what happens if a part of my brain gets screwed next time around and I end up becoming a violent person? Or a person that, I wouldn't, that I couldn't stand, that morally I'd have an issue with. And this is a legitimate fear, unfortunately. But brain damage, this kind of cognitive damage, doesn't simply affect the body. It doesn't simply affect how your vision works or how your arms or legs move or things like this. It can affect who you are on a fundamental level. And the problem is, in a lot of cases, people will be completely unaware of what's happened or what's changed. And trying to hone in on that and kind of focus down on what's actually changed and where these personality shifts are is really hard to determine. And even more so, what happens if, because I've been aware of my new cognitive limitations, the reduction in intellect and the reduction in my ability to understand things and piece things together. But what happens when the stroke hits that takes away my ability to be self-aware in that regard? That's scary stuff. I mean, the actual experience of the stroke itself was minor in comparison. I mean, some of the mini strokes, most of them have hit the language center of my brain. And on some of the earlier cases, I was sitting there literally just babbling. I would sit there and try to say, "How are you doing?" and "toy boat backward hat" would come out or something similar. It was just random words. And inside my head, I could hear what was coming out. I heard the words coming out of my mouth. And they didn't match the thoughts that were behind the words. The thoughts were clear. They were distinct. I knew exactly what I was trying to say. But then my ears would receive the words that came out of my mouth, and they were all wrong. One of the most terrifying experiences of my life at that point. But these are just the mini strokes. These I recovered from. These were fine. But this last time, the language center got hit again. And there are some words that I just know are missing. Certain parts of my vocabulary and diction are just gone. Yet, that's one half of my brain. You have the two different hemispheres. And one of the hemispheres seems to be functioning fine. When I'm thinking, just thinking to myself, nothing wrong with the vocabulary, nothing wrong with word choices, no stammer, no stutter, no confusion. But the part that does the speaking is a mess. And I'll get to a certain point that I'll start slurring words and what have you when I'm speaking. And I hear myself doing it. There's just nothing I can do about it. And it's not anything having to do with, the physical aspect of the speaking so much. It's the cognitive. It's the part that the brain does. But, even then, the idea of your words being jumbled or this and that are not anywhere nearly as big a deal as my brain simply not connecting with memories, with thoughts. Hell, first time around, immediately after the stroke, I had to rebuild facial mappings, I'm going to refer to it as. I literally was at the store and was looking around and I saw my wife, but my brain would not process that this is my wife. And the next time my kids came over to visit, my brain did not process these are my children. On some fundamental level, I was aware that's who they were, but my brain was not processing the facial features. And it took a while to get that back. I had to basically relearn everyone's faces. It was scary. It was not a pleasant feeling. And I didn't at first even realize what was happening. I just thought, okay, something's wrong with my brain. I'm not recognizing people. I don't know what this is. But after going into a couple Google Hangouts and having people with their cameras on, I started noticing features that I'd never focused before. I'll get to the writing in a moment. I started noticing features like where the bridge of the nose and the shadow around there, and it occurred to me at that point that I had to physically remap everyone's faces in my brain in terms of how their faces are put together. And it was essentially using new points. The way that I generally try to explain it with neurological damage is, for example, if you were to make the shape of, say, a pentagram, and you were to knock out one point in that, no matter which point you knock out, the shape of it is going to change. So the closest you can do is try to remap your brain so that you can try to make that shape again. But even then, because you're replacing one point of that, whether it's an outer point or an inner point, with a new dot, so to speak, to mark where that point is. And that new dot is going to somewhat change the shape of it, so it's never going to quite be the same ever again. And yeah, it should be going, Danny, by the way. I'm trying not to be too bad of an example. I still haven't been able to give up the smoking habit. I've cut down to ultralights and have as little nicotine as possible, but I figure just going on camera, I'm showing kind of a bad example of that. And oh, hang on, wrong button. Let me get to the right one. There we go. But yeah, I figure because a lot of people, yeah, and honestly, people should give me a hard time about it. But I don't know. I don't want to get too distracted by that right now. It's been a hard road. I mean, you sit there and you try to put up the proverbial good face. You try to put up the act. You put on that weird little armor or whatever that try to protect you from the world around you. But one of the problems I've had is I look at who I was years ago, when I could sit there and track things well enough that I could be working on, 3 or 4 different stories and separate windows and keep track of all of them and just keep bouncing from one to the next as ideas come or as the words come for the stories. And I can't do that anymore. I no longer have the mind for that. There was a time period back when I was engaged in debates pertaining to religion that I had quite a bit of knowledge pertaining to books and verses, and I'd memorized a whole bunch of stuff, and that's gone too. Right now, I'm going to have to see about getting an appointment with the optometrist because with this last one, my eyes have gotten worse. And it's not just the whole weird auto-filled donut that moves around the screen. I'm wearing these and I can barely read. My focus has changed completely, focal length and everything else. So I'm going to have to go to the optometrist, get new glasses, replace these, because these are both completely useless now. I have these in bifocals. But yeah, anyway, this zooms me in a bit. But it's kind of ironic because I found to get the book published and now I can barely read my own frickin' book. It's frustrating. I might end up doing a large print version so I can at least read it myself. End up just having to read it on the computer, and I have this all zoomed up now to try and make it so that I can read a little bit better. But these are frustrations, you know. The damage is there, the damage is done. And once it's done, all you can do is try to just remap your brain to compensate. But it's an uphill battle because you're always trying to compensate and you're always worried about when's the next one going to hit. And in my case, you get mini stroke, mini stroke, mini stroke. And there are a couple different schools of thought, one of which is that under a high stress situation, it makes it easier to do the mapping. But with that blood pressure increased, there's also a chance of it breaking up some of the plaque in my brain and it flowing down the stream, so to speak, and clogging up more little capillaries and starving more of my brain for oxygen. And then killing more brain cells in mass. So there's going to be definitely a point where I'm going to have to hopefully have some trusted friend on here who will tell me, dude, it's time to sit the fuck down. You're done here. Because I will be. Given enough time, I will be. Now there are goals that I have and things that I want to accomplish long before that gets here, which is why I'm trying to crack down and get book 3 finished, even though, well, honestly, you know, I don't have that huge a following on here, so there haven't been much of great sales in the first couple, but I'm hoping to start hearing back from people as to whether they like it or not, because that's the point of writing something. It's not, you know, for fame or fortune or any of this shit, certainly. I mean, I spent a fuck ton getting the damn thing copy edited because I had enough pride in it that, you know, I wanted it to be right when it was released. Granted, no matter how much you edit something, there's always going to be some problems that'll creep in there, things that the editors didn't catch and I didn't catch either, or what have you. But I wanted it as good as it could possibly be, while it's still being my story. But I don't know. I want to get the story finished. I want to finish the tale of my characters. That's a big deal to me. That's kind of my goal. But I feel like I'm running against the deadline. And honestly, that scares the ever-living crap out of me. Because after I have the next stroke, what'll I be like? Will my vision be gone completely? Because the visual centers are being clearly screwed with. Will my personality shift to the point that I won't even recognize me, so to speak? Will I even be aware of it? What'll happen to my goddamn moods? You know, will I be back to being nice and mellow? Will the bipolar be potentially worse or better? Or what's going to happen? And will I still keep feeling like I'm getting dumber and dumber every time this shit happens? Because that's what I feel like. And for me, I don't know what's worse. Phineas Gage, you're feeling like I'm on my way to flowers for algernon. But I am working on book 3. In terms of what I need to write, that part's easy. My hand not cooperating is part of the problem because, well, I have dragon naturally speaking, the part of my brain that is responsible for the speech is screwed up. The part that's nonverbal, that's going to rely on a hand that's not working quite right. And I'm still working on trying to get some use of that back, but I don't know. There's, you know, those existential crises people enter into normally in their 20s. The whole idea of who am I really? Once we get that figured out, or at least once we think we have it figured out, we expect things to get easier. But when something like this happens, it's all thrown into chaos. All of it. Because who you are is more dynamic than you think. And it's not merely personal growth. All it takes is a little thump to the head in the wrong place, and who you are can radically change. And all you're left is post hoc explanations of why you're doing what you're doing. But internally, somewhere you know. And that's kind of the other thing, with the whole split brain thing. You Each hemisphere is, for all intents and purposes, a different instance of yourself. And I'm using instance in the video game terms. Like you sit there, you go in there and you go to fight the boss, or you go in and it creates an instant, and then another people go in to fight it, it creates a new instant. Now the scenario is the same. And the boss monster in this particular example is the same. But every single thing that's the outcome of it, all the behaviors and what have you, are going to vary based on what's going on. So these two instances of yourself, so to speak, the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere, are slightly different. They're still you, but they're slightly different. And the question is, which side is dominant? Because each one, being slightly different, will have mildly different traits. And in my case, apparently only one of the two is bipolar. Go figure that shit out. And I don't know. I have crap reviewers, not much for commentary. I'm not even sure where to go with this. It's hard. Doing my damnedest to adapt. But knowing full well that my ability to do things like follow conversations is getting less and less. My ability to focus and make reasonable arguments and this and that's been damaged. that's going. My ability to track details is going. I ran into this a little bit when I was initially working on 3, which is part of why it needs a complete rewrite. When you're writing, you need to track not only the characters that are on screen, so to speak, but the ones that are off screen. And one of the problems I noticed, was that the moment that I turned my attention to one specific little set of characters, like these two characters are having a conversation, effectively every other character in the room or within earshot or anywhere else would effectively just disappear. It was like they ceased to exist while that conversation was happening, and that's not a good thing. Because you need to have, the dynamic of other characters are doing things at the same time, and what are they doing, and what's going on, and tracking all these details I used to be great with. And now not so much. It's a lot harder. Now the first time around I used Minecraft of all things to actually help get my ability to track things like that back. I mean, I would sit there and I'd be at the proverbial starting point and I'd get lost at the starting point. It was ridiculous at first, but this time around it's different. I expected the recovery and the way I was going to have to go about it to just mirror the last time around, but it's not that way. Instead of feeling like I'm rebuilding and gaining more and more, I feel like I'm losing it. The way that it feels internally is like you only have so much RAM or so much hard drive. We'll go with hard drive space. You only have so much hard drive space. And as I remap to try to get some of that knowledge back, I feel like I'm using up what space I have left. You only have so many neurons you can remap. Now, in theory, we should have a shit ton and, more than enough. But even then, what happens with those? Like I was talking about that example with the pentagram. You knock out one point, and the only way you're going to rebuild that, be able to make that shape again, is to make another point and redraw it. That's kind of what I'm doing, but none of the points are lining up. Now, I don't know. In terms of the YouTube side of things, I'm probably going to be pulling back a bit. Because if I'm going to be filling my head with something, if I'm going to be stocking my brain and rebuilding things, there are things that I need and things that I don't. And, the Bible references and the understanding of the theological crap, I don't need that. I'm not religious. What do I care? It's only to argue with people on the internet. And that's not important. Sitting there and participating in this drama and all the crap, it's not important either. What's important to me is my work, my writing. I'd like it to be my legacy. Hell, I've sold almost nothing. Hell. But, it's about trying to get people to read it. That's why it's available free through the whole Kindle Unlimited thing. I haven't done enough to try to promote it yet because I'm waiting to hear back from people that have already got it, because it's really hard for an author to evaluate their own work. I'm hoping people like it. We'll see. But right now, my confidence is taking a hit. Some of that's a stroke. A lot of that's a stroke. Because my very judgment, my cognition, my ability to reason things through, all of these things have come into question. It's not a comfortable feeling. Now, granted, the extreme confidence I used to have pertaining to my writing was kind of always smoke and mirror anyway, quite honestly. Because while you're sitting there enjoying the world, that you're confident and all this other crap, inside you're fucking writhing. On the inside. Sorry. On the damn it. Allergies. On the inside, you feel like an absolute fraud the whole time while you're saying this. Like, oh, yeah, and you're sitting there talking about your writing, and you're coming across as a bit prideful or boastful or what have you. But on the inside, there's a part of you that's always saying, this is total shit. Can't help it, man. Because you are massively overcompensating. It's kind of, wow, I really am out of coffee. Wow. I'm going to have to make some of the special stuff, I guess. Yeah, it's smoke and mirrors, and this is something that's kind of almost a trope. You know, writers sitting there and acting all confident because, you want people to read it. You want people to, in theory, buy the books, read the story, whatever. But inside, you're sitting there freaking out because, oh no, it's not ready. And that's the thing, is it's never going to be ready. I mean, internally, you never feel like you're, anyway, you never feel like it's actually done. My first two books initially were one book for that matter, and had a totally different ending. And I think there's like a 15-chapter difference between the first and the second. I mean, I extended the thing out to make 2 whole books out of it. Or 2 normal-sized books, I should say. Why am I talking about the damn book? I'm supposed to be talking about my brain. Oh, yeah, because I got distracted again. And this is the kind of thing is staying on point for me is a lot harder. Like going to like hangouts or what have you, and people are talking. And this actually started after the first stroke, but it seems to have gotten a little bit worse now. If one person talks for too long a period of time, I just start drifting off into la la land. I literally cannot pay attention. And when somebody really starts monologuing, it'll get to the point that I stop being able to even understand what they're saying because my brain will start getting tired, and then I'll start getting tired, and then I'll usually have to end up calling it. Ugh. There we go. Oh, 7 years. Hey, guys. Yeah, I'm just talking about the old noggin. Yeah, the thing is, when things change, when you change, it can be really hard to accept. Especially when it's something, like brain damage in my case or what have you, that you have no control over, and I know damn right well that given enough time, there's going to be another stroke. Because they don't have essentially Q-tips that they can stick into your freaking veins to clean out the plaque. That's just not the way it works. And there's really not much we can do about breaking it up once it's in there, and that's that. I mean, there are things you can do to try to help, like blood thinners and this kind of stuff, but that's kind of it. When somebody has a stroke, it's not like they take you into the hospital and do something to fix you. At that point, it's already happened. The damage is done. And in terms of prevention, there's not much that they really can do yet. I mean, they're working on some new things. There's one experimental treatment that they're working on now that basically they put this gel into the holes in your head. Because once those holes are there, they're not going to fill back in. That's not how things work. I mean, yes, we do replace some cells, but when you have a gaping hole, your body doesn't seem to know that it's supposed to be doing anything about it. It doesn't recognize there's a hole. It won't be refilled. Those are gone and they won't be replaced. However, the gel, what it does is it basically fills it in there so your body can start trying to regenerate into these areas that the gel has been inserted into. And that's kind of cool. And I hope that it gets out of trials at some point, the rat trials, and goes to human trials, because, hell, if that's something that'll work, sign me up for human trials, hell. First round if I could do it. Hell, at this point. I mean, well, it's not something like cancer or what have you. It's not something that's necessarily going to kill me, although it could. It's not like cancer or something. It's just one of those things, I'm likely to have more. I have no idea what's going to come of it. But I don't know, man. Adapting isn't easy. Because part of adapting isn't, simply trying to develop techniques to work around the damage. It's not merely about trying to get used to your new circumstances. It's about figuring out who you are now that things have changed. And simply trying to overcome things is also, in the case of something like this, is also worrying about what's going to happen the next time. Trying to get everything in place for what happens when that stroke hits that either kills you or ends up with you being essentially a vegetable. Or worse, trapped in your own head, or a person that you wouldn't want to be. I think back to the way I used to be. Think about it a lot. It's hard not to. Almost to the point of obsession. And then I think about who I am now. And there are days that I don't want to be on camera, that I don't want to look in the mirror, that I don't want to accept that, I'm not who I was just a couple months ago. And I sure as hell aren't who I was a few years ago. Which brings to mind the question of, really, who are you? Who am I? Yeah. I don't know, man. I'm probably not going to be doing much for normal videos on here. I'm going to keep doing my stuff with working on the edit live because it's helping and it's therapeutic. So I'm definitely going to do more with that. Maybe talk a little more about process. Hell, hopefully I'll be able to just break in and start babbling about my universe, Corollis. Different life forms, and different planets, and the way things are there. That's the thing I don't want to die with me when I do go. That's something I'd like to leave behind. Which means at some point I should grab my damn notes and start releasing some of them for like creation of different species and all this kind of stuff. It started off as a role-playing game, technically. So, granted, I'm on like the 4th edition, and I never released the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd, so I don't know that necessarily says much. But it's a thing. It's there. I don't know. Yeah, me going online to sitting there talking about inner turmoil is not usually my thing either. But after a point, you start asking these questions like, what am I going to be leaving behind? And I don't mean material, and I don't even necessarily mean people. We all run into the situation at some point in our lives of, if I were to go, who would remember me? How would I be remembered? And on some levels, I think, okay, if my ability to follow conversations, my ability to have discussions, if my cognition keeps getting poorer and poorer over time, they'll reach the day that nobody will remember who I had been. They'll only remember who I was at the end, or who I am today. And I worry about that most with my family, particularly my kids. I mean, the hell was that? Hang on. I have no bloody idea. Is this thing plugged up or something? Nope, there we go. Yep, it was plugged up. Okay. Apparently there's a little goop in the thing for the percolator there, and it just popped its cork. Okay, there we go. Heard a thump behind me. A dull thud at that. I don't know. There's a part of me that just wants to say, hug your loved ones. Make sure you always tell them that you love them. Just because you never know what tomorrow holds. But at the same point, if you spend too much damn time doing that, you're not going to have the loved ones anymore because you're going to annoy the crap out of them with it, right? Damned if you do, damned if you don't. But yeah, sitting around arguing with people on the internet, there's no point. Participating in the drama, there's no point. I've got more important shit to do. Much more important shit to do. Got a life to live. And sitting around messing around with the drama, I'm not going to bother. Now, I don't know. No, thanks, Pluto. I'm gonna have to do a lot. I'm gonna probably have to start doing less. I've been checking myself in Hangouts lately and paying attention, and I've been noticing that I've been getting lost pretty easily. If somebody talks for like 6, 7 minutes, I just start losing track of the conversation. Now after the first stroke, I literally would have to interject, and it was funny because initially I really, really pissed Fiona off with this until I sat her down and talked with her about it at one point because Fiona tends to talk for longer periods of time with pauses. And initially I would just interrupt her for a second, but I didn't want to say why I was interrupting. So I would just cut in with some little quip or what have you, and she'd get frustrated that I was interrupting her. And then later on, I explained it to her, and now I can say, Fiona, hang on for 1 second. Okay, go ahead. And because she knows that what I basically have to do is get that pause of her speaking to basically reset my brain so that I can pay attention, because I'd like to hear what she's saying. I'd like to follow the conversation. But with that getting harder, if it's getting to the point that I'm having that much problems following the conversation, should I be part of the conversation? Or should I just kind of, at most, do my own thing? I mean, unfortunately, with my hand, it's not like I can write down notes to keep track. Yeah. Yeah, I get what you're saying there, Fiona, but yeah, but yeah, so now instead of derailing, it's just like, wait a second, go ahead. And that's all it would take was a second to reset it. But right now, I mean, in some of these conversations, I'm like, I don't even know the words coming out of your mouth anymore. This happened in Slim Jim's thing yesterday at one point. And granted, Sock and this and somebody else was arguing, but even before that, when it was just me dealing to some degree with Max and Sokka, hell, just listening to Max, and Max was monologuing. I'm like, I am so freaking lost. I have no idea what's going on. But yeah, Phineas Gage, who I am shifts. I liked the calm me. I like that mellow me. I like the person that was, unshakable and mellow after I got the ability to actually feel emotions back after a few months of having no emotions whatsoever. That calm, constant, like kind of Zen state thing was great. Now bipolar is back, and not only the moods, but I'm kind of ragey. I get kind of pissy a lot, and often for no freaking reason. And it has to do a lot of times with like a hand or what have you. And hell, I almost smashed a few things around here because I've gotten frustrated trying to open things or what have you. And the first few days, me trying to get used to my hand back when it was really screwed up, and I had this case of mitten hands. I was like this for a while. I literally was throwing things because I was getting so frustrated, and that's never been me. That's never been the kind of thing that I did. So on some levels, I wasn't recognizing myself when I'd start acting like that. And there's this point, even though you're living in your own skin, you're wondering who the hell you are because you don't recognize your own thoughts or actions. Kind of freaky. Yet a lot of people don't, when they have situations like this, don't even have the self-awareness to be aware that there has been a change. I guess I've been lucky in that regard, at least. But I feel like I'm a new me, and I'm worried that I'll wake up another new me tomorrow, and I don't know who that'll be, and that's terrifying. Now back to the comment I made earlier about, being somebody that writes, I worry about foreshadowing. It's not just a matter of the whole window thing and looking out and getting a nice little scenic place here so that if I get to the point that I'm just sitting there stuck in my own head drooling on myself, wheel me in front of the window and friggin' leave me there until you're ready to be done with me. It goes beyond that. And I lose track of what I'm talking about. I even lose track of my own words. Um, yeah, cognition, trapped in your own head. Um, yeah, that's a possibility. But I feel like more and more of who I am is drifting away sometimes. Sometimes I feel like I've always felt like I'm made of words. I write. I am made of words was always my thing. That and I'm only brilliant on paper. Things like this is what I used to say all the time. But as that seems to lessen, the more I search for words, the more trouble I have with actually having to go and look up words that are common use that I know that I should know. And I'm like, what the hell? It makes it harder. I start not recognizing myself. I mean, for a while, the bipolar gone and always calm. I was really kind of happy with who I was. My wife had mentioned that personality shift on that one and said she liked it. That was great. But now I'm this ball of weird angsty frustration and moods are all over the place. I don't know. I'm just glad she puts up with me. I'm lucky I found one of the good ones. But every time now that I hear somebody sitting there talking about like mind-body duality, I'm like, no, the mind and the body are one. Who you are. The question of consciousness, as far as I'm concerned, is answered. We are our brain. There's no divine puppeteer. All it takes is, well, as I refer to it now, being phineas gauged to wake up to that. But some days, I feel like I'm stuck between phineas gage and flowers for Algernon. Because it's not simply a matter of, like in flowers for Algernon, where the person, if I remember correctly, the main character, spoilers, committed suicide because he remembered being intelligent after getting that medication, experimental stuff that made the formerly retarded kid brilliant. Then he went back to being stupid and remembered being smart and took his life. In my case, it's a little bit different because it's not simply the intellect. It's the person I was. I mean, emotionally, mentally, and otherwise, behaviorally. That shifts as well. I remember who I was, and I look back on that. And I'm not very happy with who I am now, and I'm worried who I'll be when the next one hits. I'm pretty damn sure they will be. Oh, I know I need time, Fiona. I just need to talk. I just need to get this out of my head. Because for the last couple of days it's been consuming me because it seems like I get in one hangout after another and I just can't handle it. I can't handle the higher level of conversations that I prefer. I can't follow them. I get lost. A lot of things that should be easy concepts just aren't being grasped. I can't latch onto them. It makes me feel like I don't belong in those kinds of hangouts or in those discussions. It makes me feel like I have nothing to contribute. And it makes me wonder how much longer I will have anything to contribute. You know? my confidence is shot. I'd hate to it someday, have a bit that just that little bit more damage or what have you that puts me on the level that the only person I could actually have an argument with is G-Man because he has no fucking arguments of his own and is so poor at discussing anything. I don't want to become that person. Good God, no. I liked thinking about things differently. I mean, we all have our canned arguments. And the funny thing is those cans are still there. They're on the proverbial shelf inside my mind. Somebody sits there and hits me up with one of the standard arguments. It's like, here's my canned response. Get the hell out of my way. But what about when the can isn't what they're asking for? What about when they're looking for the real conversation? Not convinced I can have those. At least not right now. I mean, I can work on the recovery. I can work on getting to the point that I can have those conversations. But will that take away from me using, the neurons I have left to remap for something that's more important to me? I had fun when I was messing with the Woo Peddlers, and though unfortunately that didn't last as long as I was planning on. I had a lot of fun, when I was in some of the theological discussions I've had. I've had a great time with it. But I have more important things for me. I think of things a little bit differently. I present arguments that some people hadn't before, or think of things in slightly different ways, and this comes from being a writer in some levels, and just seeing the world a little bit differently. I guess being the weirdo that has mood swings and that extra, bounce of whatever the hell energy, with the emotions and everything else comes flipping through. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I need to stop being that guy, running into conversations because, haha, I've got a concept on this one. And then not being able to follow the conversation because of holes in my head. At the same point, in terms of a YouTube following, I don't think me sitting here on screen working on editing or what have you is going to do it. And the majority of my subscribers didn't do it because I write or because they wanted storytelling time. Granted, I've been recently told that the whole story time thing is a meme on here for people just being idiots, basically. Yeah, not for actual stories, just for people like, oh, well, I went to the mall and, no, no, no. I should probably cut this off in a couple minutes. Yeah, just thought I'd invite everyone into my skull for a little bit and sit down in that parlor, somewhere buried deep in my mind behind a blocked door, where there's a couple chairs and a couple tables, and coffee eternally percolating in the back, waiting for a guest to sit down on the couch and listen to me just babble on mindlessly. Little peek into my brain. And of course, beyond there's the big old vault door that leads to where the writing's done, because you have to keep that sealed away until it's time. Go back there sometimes and stoke the furnace, get the gears rolling, including the few that might have been chipped off over time, and some in mine clearly have. Gears getting worn down as I get older. Let's still have to crank it up now and then. But yeah, one thing that's hard to do is to get into somebody else's head, especially when you're not invited. In my case, but today, for now at least, I decided to open the door and let people in a little bit. See what's rolling around up there. See what's hiding behind the cobwebs. Your clarity on the lack of mind-body dualism would really be more worth more exposition. Okay, I can talk a little bit on that. The biggest problem with the notion of mind-body dualism ties into this notion of the divine puppeteer. The divine puppeteer is essentially that you are a soul just manipulating the meat sack. Now you could say that, with brain damage and this and that, that spirit or what have you is going to actually change the functionality of the meat sack. Now, when I had that first mini stroke, I did have a little bit of duality in that what I was thinking and what I was saying didn't quite match. But it wasn't until the later episode, and the real strokes, we'll just say, that my view of that changed because who I was changed. It wasn't simply one of these things like, oh well, gee, the puppeteer is having problems managing the meat sack, as one would expect with mind-body dualism. But it was more as if another puppeteer had taken over, one with different proclivities, one with different views and ideals. I mean, I was bordering on religious right before this last stroke, and now I'm back to, well, the whole notion's idiotic, etc. So for a brief time period, there was like a split brain patient that I would have answered differently for each eye. And for that matter, for 3 days after that last stroke, when I was walking through the house, I was walking around objects that my brain wasn't even processing what they were. And for that matter, anything for which my brain did not immediately have a concept for the thing, I was unable to perceive at all. I mean, on some levels, it was kind of like if I were to cover one eye kind of thing, or cover one half of my brain. I knew what it was, but I couldn't express it. I couldn't understand it. But looking at it, so to speak, with the other eye or the other side of my brain more literally, that part of me that could not understand it all. So only one part of me could actually understand it. So there's one part of me, but like, oh, it's a table. We don't want to walk into that. And the other part of me is like, I need to step around this thing, but not recognizing what the thing was. It's hard. And the first time around, I sat there and I worked it, and I had to rely heavily on family members to let me know where these differences were. I mean, like I said, my wife said, you've been really cold lately, and I had to evaluate myself, and I'm like, you know what? I haven't been feeling any emotion about anything. And honestly, I didn't until, well, my daughter at one point, and this had nothing to do with that, but several months later, my daughter actually tried committing suicide. She's a cutter, and she got hospitalized again. And that there was enough of a just absolute severe emotional trauma for me that it forcibly seemed to reconnect that emotional center in my brain. But it took something that extreme to get that to reconnect at all. But yeah, so what do you say if you're going back briefly to mind-body dualism? If you're a mind-body dualist, what do you say about that time period during which you've had some brain damage and you're absolutely unable to feel emotion? And then all of a sudden something dramatic happens, and now you're not only feel emotion, but nothing can actually get you upset. Extreme calmness. At that point, it's like I said, it's like a different puppeteer's taken over. It's like for that in that moment, you become a different person temporarily. And only through people saying, okay, well, I've noticed this, or I've noticed that, or you're behaving this way or that way, are you aware of it? I mean, I've always been very self-aware in that, from the age of good grief. God, I was in therapy starting at like age 8 or something like that. Got first hospitalized at age 12 in a psych ward, was there for about a year and a half, got sent to a locked ward for about 4 months, got sent back to that one for another 3 months, ended up in a residential living program for kids with mental problems for about a year after that. I mean, altogether, if you go through to my good grief, like mid-20s, I probably spent a total of about, I don't know, 4 or 5 years in very different psychiatric facilities. But you can't do that without developing a intense level of introspection. And most people don't do that or can't do that. I don't know which. So because of this, I was a little bit more aware of what was happening to me, or at least where the abnormalities were. But the uncontrollable rage out of what should be minimal frustration, that's new. And yeah, I've thrown things and what have you, and I'm starting to get that back under control. But the first couple of times, I'd sit there, be trying to do something, and I kept fumbling and getting frustrated, and I'd grab something and throw it, and all of a sudden, that's me. All of a sudden, I'm the person that gets pissed off over the littlest thing and starts chucking things. Now, talk to me about mind-body dualism. How the person you are and how you behave isn't simply a part of the brain. When I've gone from being one kind of person to another one, abruptly, it just doesn't gel well with this idea that you have essentially the soul manipulating the body. Because on a fundamental level, on an emotional level, on a core level, it was like I was somebody else. Now, the majority of who I was still there, it seemed. But like I said, with the right and left hemisphere, it's kind of like you're just another instance of yourself. And honestly, I think part of the proverbial sense of the other that we experience, which kind of leads to the idea of this mind-body dualism, I think that's just the link between these two different parts of who you are. Because they're both you. Both hemispheres are you. And working together, they are you as you are. But individually, they're like two slightly different instances of who you are. And if that's the case, the other you're sensing, that dualism you're sensing, it's just you, and has been the whole time. It's just each of those hemispheres being vaguely aware of the other. And I think that's really all it is. I hope that kind of answers a little bit. Was it Pluto that asked about that? I think it was. I have to scroll back. I'm losing my mind. Okay. Okay, now what is this wall of text, Nodvik? Monologues have definitely fit in here. They're nice. Calm down, Nodvik. Here we go. Yeah, I know there's some people on here that have been with me for quite a while, and sometimes I think like I really a lot of time feel unworthy of the respect that I've garnered on here rather. Garnished today. Yeah, that was good. Garnished. I've garnished attention. Yeah, the attention that I've garnered on here, I sometimes feel like I don't necessarily enjoy, or rather enjoy, like I don't necessarily deserve. But it's a thing. I mean, you can't. Well, I don't know. Maybe you can kind of guide people to think or perceive things one way or the other. But the thing is, I've always had a certain level of respect on here, whether I earned it or not, or whether I deserve it or not, is completely irrelevant in the long run. My concern is that as time goes on, all the things that got me that respect to begin with will kind of lessen to the point that in order to preserve the dignity that I have left, I'll have to kind of bow out of the online community. Actually, Pluto, that's the interesting thing when you describe the divine puppeteer notion, that the soul is just kind of manipulating the body. I've done that in a couple hangouts trying to explain the notion, the difference between like the idea of the body of the soul, and had theists like, what kind of weird stuff is that? That I don't believe in anything like that. I'm like, you don't believe in a soul? What? Because I mean, even most of the theists don't actually stop to think about what that would mean, relatively speaking. Now, granted, with how I generally express the divine puppeteer idea, it kind of makes the idea of punishing people for sin a little goofy because the body limits the capabilities of the spirit. But, finding out that the body controls who you are and not this proverbial spirit, that changes a lot of perspectives, honestly. I look back back when I was doing the whole shamanic path and going on quote spirit journeys and all this kind of stuff. And I had ways to explain a lot of it having to do with psychology and this kind of stuff, and it's just merely exploring the subconscious. But there's always a part of me that's like, but there's such a reality to it. How can I deny a spiritual aspect based upon everything that I've experienced? But now, with what I understand about how the mind works, or how the persona works, really, in terms of how brain damage affects it, I sit there and think, all this out of body, spirit journey, all this stuff is such horseshit. Because who you think you are when you're experiencing this is completely the same as who you are here. When, if there was some kind of divine puppeteer, the person that you were outside of yourself, the person you would be when, you know, sending yourself out into the multiverse or whatever crap you believe in, would be a different person fundamentally than who you are linked to the body. Because linked to the body, you are just your mind. You're just what you've experienced. There's nothing beyond that. There's no great revelation. There's no understanding of things beyond who you are. Just smoke and mirrors. It's games we play with ourselves. Fun games sometimes, mind you, but just games. Mind-body dualism, my ass. Everything that you think you are is linked to your body. And it can change. And all it takes is a tiny little plaque. Tiny little bit of plaque moving down an artery. Slowing blood flow to a few capillaries. And suddenly you wake up someone else. But that's not part of the equation because you're supposed to be this other person as well. You're this spirit that independent of the... No. No. What they're experiencing is the other part of their brain, the other hemisphere. One side trying to reconcile itself with the other. Yeah. Well, I don't know. Get your space out for a moment. And from that smell, wonderful, joyous smell coming from behind me, the coffee is ready. Well, still percolating a little bit, but it smells dark enough to me, so I'm having my damn coffee. Let me double check it. Still a little too close to water. Actually, that reminds me. I got a new toy, didn't I? Let's try this. I need another coffee cup. Put that down here. Oh, let's see now. Let's try. That's a little big. Yeah, it'll do. I'll just fill it halfway. Here we go. Y'all gonna need to excuse me while I deal with something that's much more important than the stream as far as I'm concerned, because I need to caffeinate my life. There we go. And we pour the water in here, I guess. I hope I'm doing this right. Nope, maybe not. No, I think I might have screwed up. Okay. Is that how you fill it? I thought it was. Yep, okay, I just have to wait for it to drain in, I guess. First time trying to use this thing. Oh, hang on, let me... Is that? Okay. I have no idea what I'm doing with this thing. Probably going to destroy it. We'll find out. There we go. That seems pretty good. Okay. Pop the coffee cup down here. Now, where are these stupid little... here we go. Especially flavored coffee. Weird ass shit. Yeah, I got a Keurig thing for when I run out of coffee or when it's taking too fucking long to brew. The problem with a 40 cup pot, crap, is, yeah, I'm dropping stuff everywhere here. The problem with a pot this size is that, here we go, put that in there, okay, there we go. But the problem with a pot this size, of course, is that it takes forever to freaking brew, especially because it's a percolator. Let's see how this works. So I got one of those Keurig things for emergency pots, essentially. This is my first time using it. So we'll see. I've got this weird, like, vanilla, mocha, whatever the hell else coffee that I'm trying out. I don't know if anyone has any questions or whatever, because I can't see the screen from here. Okay, now are you on? It looks like it's on. Have to press it a second time or something? Or... No, that's on. Okay. No idea what I'm doing here. Yeah, hopefully that couple stay balanced. It's a little bit large for this. Okay, there we go. Now let me go check to see if we have who we have in here. Yeah, still the same crowd. It looks like. And I think I babbled on long enough, probably. Actually, it's kind of funny that you mentioned tulpas, Nodvik. One of the things I've been trying to do is essentially build a tulpa of myself. A tulpa, for anyone that doesn't know, is just basically a construct you create in your mind with enough, so to speak, substance to it that you can actually communicate with it. So I've been trying to essentially build a tulpa of myself, or I guess I should say my former self, my ideal self in my head, with the idea of being able to, when I can't come up with the word or I don't can't figure out the concept, that I'll essentially have another me instance of myself in my head that I've created to be able to give myself the answer or to help myself figure things out. The problem is that it's not the most efficient process. So I kind of got it vaguely in place, so I have this other essentially construct self within my head that can answer questions when I need them answered. But it's slow in responding. It's basically like it has a really slow processor time, so it was a little bit of a failed idea. Now, one of the initial concepts was, well, maybe I could kind of overlay it over me and replace myself with another copy of myself that's more functional, but yeah, my brain's not going to rewrite that way. I fucking tried. It just doesn't work. But I can have basically a second me to talk to and bounce things off of, which I guess is okay. It's just weird. I don't know, man. I mean, I'm probably explaining this incredibly poorly as it is. But yeah, that was one of the initial ideas, because it's the way that it seems to be right now is that the two hemispheres, so to speak, seem to be more separated than they've ever been before. Because you have that, like I said, you have the verbal and the nonverbal. And they've done tests where, like in split brain patients, that they have them like cover one eye, like they basically cover one eye or the other, and then give them something to respond to, whether it's a block or what have you. And when the other side is answering, it will basically, why are you doing this or what have you? It'll respond and be confused as to why it's why you are acting the way you are, and we'll try to. Did I not put enough fucking water in there? Yeah, fuck it. I guess it's a small cup then. Oh well. I guess that's it. Are we done? I think we're done. Yeah. Yeah. Oh well. So be it. Yep, we are definitely done. Light went off. I have coffee though, and the big pot will end up finishing brewing eventually. Yeah. Sorry, I'm just babbling at this point. Probably should have ended the stream by now. Still waiting to hear back from anyone that's actually gotten the book and gotten any real distance in it. I hope folks are enjoying it. I don't know. It's going to take a while, though. I mean, hell, some of them are still being shipped, so. But some of them should have got there by now, and I don't know. We do have one person that's a weekend reader or at least seems to be a weekend reader that's gotten, I don't know, about, what's that? Probably about third chapter. From the looks of it. When people get the Kindle Unlimited, it tracks how many pages are read, so I have a vague meter on that. So the one person that got the Unlimited, I don't know, they're part way into it. I don't know. I'm worried that they might have decided they didn't like it and stopped reading, but I don't know. That happens, I guess. Let's see now. And I see the same number of viewers, no new comments. I'm going to take this offline. Well, thanks for keeping me company. Now, the me I am today at least. Trapped somewhere between flowers for Algernon and Phineas Gage. Where is it? There it is. Catch y'all later.